I held the slip of paper with the address, watching steam rise from my coffee cup. Thomas had left early, his kiss perfunctory against my cheek. "Go there tomorrow," he'd said the night before. "I've arranged with the caretaker. He'll show you what and how to water." The greenhouse sat 20 minutes outside the city, tucked behind a grove of oak trees. I'd never seen it before, though Thomas claimed he'd been renting it for months. His latest obsession with rare plants had consumed our spare room, then the back porch, and now this. The morning air hung thick with humidity as I parked beside a weathered shed. Through the glass panels, I glimpsed a jungle of green, leaves pressed against the windows like hands reaching out. Thomas had been specific about the timing. 10 o'clock sharp. The caretaker would be waiting. I pushed through the heavy door and stepped into another world. The heat wrapped around me immediately, carrying the scent of rich earth and blooming jasmine. Mist hung in the air, catching the morning light and turning everything soft-edged, dreamlike. My footsteps echoed on the brick path that wound between raised beds. Orchids cascaded from hanging baskets. Tropical vines twisted up support posts, their leaves broad as dinner plates. I'd never seen Thomas's collection like this, wild and abundant, as if he'd been hiding this side of himself. A metal watering can sat on a workbench near the door, its surface beaded with condensation. I touched the handle, wondering where to begin. "You must be Rachel." The voice came from somewhere beyond the ferns. I turned toward the sound, my pulse quickening. Through the maze of plants, I caught glimpses of movement, a shoulder, then a hand parting the broad leaves of a monstera. He emerged from behind a towering bird of paradise, and I understood immediately why Thomas had been vague about the caretaker's name. This man couldn't be more than 35, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of sage. Dirt streaked his forearms, and his shirt clung to his chest in the humid air. "Soren," he said, extending a hand. His palm was warm, calloused from outdoor work. "Thomas told me you'd be coming." I withdrew my hand too quickly. "He said you'd show me the watering schedule." "Among other things." Soren's smile was slight, knowing. He gestured toward the deeper sections of the greenhouse. "Come, let me show you what needs attention." We walked the narrow paths together, his shoulder occasionally brushing mine when we passed between closely spaced plants. He spoke about moisture levels and feeding schedules, but I found myself watching his hands as they touched the leaves. Gentle, reverent, the way someone might stroke a lover's skin. "Thomas mentioned you have a gift for listening," Soren said, stopping beside a cluster of white orchids. "He said you know how to hear what plants need, even when everything around is silent." The words felt intimate, loaded with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Thomas had never said anything like that about me. In fact, he rarely mentioned my abilities at all. "I don't know about that," I said. Soren stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the earth on his skin. "Don't you?" The silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft drip of the irrigation system and my own careful breathing. Soren reached past me to adjust a valve on the wall, his arm brushing against my shoulder. The contact sent heat through my cotton dress. "This controls the mist," he said, his voice lower now. "Turn it here for the tropical section." His hand covered mine on the valve, guiding my fingers to the correct position. I should have pulled away, should have stepped back, created distance, remembered I wore Thomas's ring. Instead, I let him show me how to read the pressure gauge, how to test the soil moisture with my fingertips. When he handed me a small brass key, our fingers lingered together. "For the supply closet," he explained. "Thomas wanted you to have access to everything." The key was warm from his palm. I slipped it into my pocket, feeling its weight against my hip. "He's lucky," Soren said, studying my face. To have someone who cares about growing things. Is he? The question escaped before I could stop it. Soren's eyes darkened, and something shifted in the air between us. A recognition, an acknowledgement of the tension that had been building since I'd walked through the door. He moved closer until I could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Rachel. My name on his lips sounded different than when Thomas said it, more careful, more precious. I should go, I whispered, but I didn't move. Should you? His fingers found the stem of a white camellia beside my shoulder, brushing the petals with the same gentleness I'd noticed before. Then, slowly, his touch moved from the flower to my hand. I didn't pull away. What happened next belonged to the greenhouse, to the mist and the heat and the secret world Thomas had created but never shared with me. Soren's mouth found mine between the hanging orchids, soft at first, then insistent as I responded. I tasted earth and rain on his lips. My hands found the front of his shirt, damp with perspiration, and pulled him closer. We moved deeper into the green maze, past the workbench where a leather journal lay open, its pages filled with Thomas's careful handwriting. The brick path led to a small alcove where a wooden bench sat among the ferns. Soren's hands were gentle as they traced the line of my jaw, then moved lower, finding the pulse at my throat. "Are you sure?" he whispered against my ear. I answered by drawing him down beside me on the bench, the greenhouse wrapped around us like a cocoon, all steaming glass and living walls. I lost myself in the rhythm of his breathing, the weight of his body, the way he whispered my name like a prayer. Time dissolved. The outside world, Thomas, my marriage, my carefully ordered life, faded to nothing. There was only this, skin against skin, the soft sounds we made together, the way Soren looked at me as if I were something rare and beautiful he'd been waiting to discover. Afterward, we lay tangled together among the cushions someone had left on the bench. Sweat cooled on my skin as the mist system cycled on, filling the air with fine droplets. "Thomas knew," Soren said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "Didn't he?" I stiffened. "What do you mean?" But even as I asked, I was remembering the way Thomas had insisted I come here, alone, at this specific time. The way he'd spoken about listening to silence. "The journal," Soren nodded toward the workbench. "He's been documenting more than just plant care." I dressed quickly, my fingers fumbling with buttons that had seemed so easy to undo minutes before. The leather journal drew my eyes like a magnet, but I couldn't bring myself to look at what Thomas had written. Soren watched me from the bench, making no move to dress. "Rachel, I have to go." I smoothed my skirt, tried to tame my hair. "This was what it was," he finished. "Don't apologize for it." But guilt was already creeping in, cold against my flushed skin. I'd crossed a line I'd never imagined crossing. Worse, I'd enjoyed it. Every touch, every whispered word, every moment of abandon I'd never experienced in my marriage. I grabbed the metal watering can from the workbench, needing something concrete to hold on to. The weight of it grounded me, reminded me why I'd come here in the first place. "The plants," I said stupidly. "I never learned about the plants." Soren's laugh was gentle, not mocking. "You learned what you needed to." He stood then, pulling on his shirt with unhurried movements. "Will you come back?" The question hung between us like the mist that never quite settled. I wanted to say yes, wanted to promise I'd return tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until this feeling, this aliveness I'd discovered in his arms, became familiar instead of shocking. Instead, I clutched the watering can tighter and walked toward the door. "Thomas will ask about the plants," I said without turning around. "Tell him they're thriving." The morning air felt cold after the greenhouse heat. I sat in my car for a long time, watching condensation form on the windows and thinking about the way Soren had said my name. Like it meant something. Like I meant something. Thomas was waiting in the kitchen when I got home, coffee mug in one hand, newspaper folded beside his plate. He looked up as I entered, and I felt certain my guilt must be written across my face in bold letters. "How is the greenhouse?" he asked, his tone casual. "Fine." I set my purse on the counter, avoiding his eyes. The caretaker showed me around. "Soren's good with plants, knows how to make things grow that others can't." Thomas sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim. "Did you learn what you needed?" The question felt loaded, echoing what Soren had said. I busied myself at the sink, running water for no particular reason. "The watering schedule is complex," I said. "All those different species. But manageable. For someone with the right touch." I turned off the tap, my hands trembling slightly. "Thomas, why did you really want me to go there?" He folded his newspaper with precise movements. "You've seemed restless lately, disconnected. I thought working with living things might help." "Help with what?" "With remembering who you are, what you're capable of feeling." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring at my husband's calm face. In 15 years of marriage, he'd never spoken to me with such directness about my emotions, my needs, my inner life. "I don't understand." Thomas stood, moving to the window that overlooked our small backyard garden. "We've been going through the motions, Rachel, both of us. When was the last time you felt truly alive?" "This morning," I thought, "in Soren's arms, among the orchids and ferns." But I couldn't say that. Could I? "Why are you asking me this?" He turned back to me, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A sadness in his eyes, a resignation that looked like it had been growing for months. "Because I love you enough to want you to be happy. Even if that means—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Even if that means acknowledging what we've both been pretending isn't true." That evening, Thomas worked in his study while I sat on the back porch, trying to make sense of our conversation. The small brass key Soren had given me felt heavy in my pocket, a secret weight I carried. Had Thomas known what would happen at the greenhouse? The possibility seemed impossible and inevitable at the same time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The orchids miss you already." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Soren had somehow gotten my number, or Thomas had given it to him. The thought made my stomach twist with a mixture of excitement and dread. I deleted the message without responding, but the words stayed with me. "The orchids miss you." As if the plants themselves were conspirators in whatever was happening between us. Thomas appeared in the doorway, a glass of wine in each hand. He offered me one and settled into the chair beside mine. "Beautiful evening," he said. "Yes." We sat in silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Our garden looked small and tame compared to the wild abundance of the greenhouse. Everything here was controlled, predictable, safe. "The greenhouse key," Thomas said suddenly. "Did Soren give you one?" My hand moved instinctively to my pocket. "Yes, for the supply closet." "Good. You'll need access when you go back." "Who says I'm going back?" Thomas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The plants need daily attention, and Soren could use the help." "Thomas, what's really going on?" He set down his wine glass and looked at me directly. "I've been thinking about what we both need. What might make us happy. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is give someone permission to discover who they really are." The words hung between us like a challenge. or an invitation? Even if it changes everything? Especially then. The next morning, I found Thomas in his study, writing in a leather journal identical to the one I'd seen at the greenhouse. He looked up as I entered, pen poised over the page. "What are you documenting?" I asked. "Growth patterns, environmental factors, how different conditions affect development." He closed the journal and set it aside. "Are you going to the greenhouse today?" "I don't know." "Rachel." His voice was gentle but firm. "We need to talk honestly about what's happening." I sat in the chair across from his desk, my hands folded in my lap like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. "You arranged this," I said. "Didn't you?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Not the specifics, but I knew Soren would be there. I knew he'd find you attractive. And I suspected you might respond to him in ways you haven't responded to me in years." The admission should have made me angry. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. The pretending was over. "Why?" "Because I've watched you disappear, piece by piece, into a life that doesn't fit you anymore. Because I've felt myself doing the same thing." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because sometimes love means admitting when something isn't working and trying to find a solution that serves everyone." "What kind of solution?" Thomas opened a desk drawer and pulled out a set of papers. "I've been researching alternative arrangements, couples who've found ways to honor their commitment while acknowledging their individual needs." I stared at the documents, articles about open marriages, polyamory, conscious uncoupling. "You want a divorce." "I want us both to be happy. If that means staying married but allowing each other the freedom to explore other connections, then yes. If it means separating so we can find what we need elsewhere, then that too." My head spun. "And Soren?" "Is a good man who deserves to know where he stands in all this." I drove to the greenhouse that afternoon with Thomas's words echoing in my mind. The key felt different in my hand now, not stolen or secret, but somehow sanctioned. Soren was waiting among the roses, deadheading spent blooms with careful precision. He looked up as I approached, his expression guarded. "I wasn't sure you'd come back." Neither was I. We stood facing each other across a bed of hybrid teas, the space between us charged with everything unsaid. The mist timer clicked on overhead, sending fine droplets cascading down around us. "Thomas knows," I said finally. "About yesterday." Soren's hands stilled on the roses. "I figured he might. Did you know, did you know he'd arranged it?" "I suspected." He set down his pruning shears and moved around the flower bed to stand closer to me. "Does it matter?" "I don't know. Maybe. Yes." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the greenhouse heat. It feels like I've been living in someone else's story. Like everyone knows the plot except me. And now? Now I don't know what's real anymore. What I felt with you, was that real? Or was it just part of Thomas's experiment? Soren reached out and touched my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "What do you think?" I closed my eyes, remembering the way he'd looked at me, the way my body had responded to his touch. The connection had felt genuine, electric, impossible to fake. "It was real," I whispered. "Then that's all that matters." He kissed me again, softer this time, less desperate. When we broke apart, I saw the automatic timer on the wall behind him, its digital display counting down the minutes until the next mist cycle. Even here, everything was controlled, scheduled, managed. "What happens now?" I asked. "Whatever you want to happen." But that was the problem. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure what I wanted. I spent the rest of the afternoon helping Soren tend the plants, learning the intricate dance of care each species required. We worked mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet now, free of the tension that had crackled between us before. As the sun began to set, painting the greenhouse walls with golden light, I found myself at the workbench where Thomas's journal lay open. This time, I didn't look away. The pages were filled with observations, but not about plants. About me. About us. Day 15. R seems more withdrawn, barely spoke during dinner. Day 23, suggested the greenhouse again. She deflected, changed subject to grocery list. Day 31, made appointment with Soren. Told him about R's love of growing things, her need for something that responds to her touch. I flipped through more pages, seeing my marriage dissected in Thomas's careful handwriting, not with cruelty, but with the same scientific precision he applied to his botanical observations. He's been planning this for months, I said aloud. Soren appeared beside me, reading over my shoulder. Does that make it wrong? I don't know. Maybe it makes it honest. The final entry was dated yesterday. R went to greenhouse, hoping she finds what she's been looking for. I closed the journal and picked up the watering can from the bench. Its familiar weight anchored me as I moved through the greenhouse, tending to the plants we'd neglected while talking. Each one responded to the water, leaves lifting, stems straightening, flowers opening a little wider. Thomas was right about one thing, I said as I watered the last of the orchids. I do know how to listen to what living things need. Including yourself? I set down the can and looked at Soren. I'm learning. We left the greenhouse together as darkness fell, locking the door behind us. But I kept the key. Thomas was waiting in the kitchen when I returned, the same position as the day before. But this time, he held a watering can. Not the metal one from the greenhouse, but a ceramic piece I'd never seen before. I wondered what you watered first, he said quietly, setting the can on the counter. The flowers or yourself? I sat across from him, the brass key warm in my palm. Both, I think. And I'm not sure what happens next. Thomas nodded, as if he'd expected this answer. Soren's a good man. And you care about him. And you still care about me. I met his eyes, seeing the husband I'd married 15 years ago and the stranger he'd somehow become. Yes, but differently than I did before. Different how? I considered this, turning the key over in my fingers. Before, I loved you because it was safe, expected, the thing I was supposed to do. I paused, searching for the right words. Now I love you because you were brave enough to risk everything for my happiness, even if it meant losing me. Thomas smiled, and this time it did reach his eyes. I haven't lost you. We've just found a different way to be together. What does that mean practically? It means we figure it out as we go, all three of us. The idea should have seemed impossible, scandalous, wrong. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing we'd discussed in months. The greenhouse, I said. Will you come with me tomorrow? Would you like me to? I think it's time you saw what we've been growing there. Thomas reached across the table and took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine around the brass key. I think you're right. Outside, the first frost of the season touched our small garden, but inside the greenhouse, I knew everything would still be blooming. The next morning arrived with a crystalline clarity that made the frost-covered world look like it had been dipped in silver. Thomas and I walked the familiar path to the greenhouse in comfortable silence, our breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. I could feel the weight of the brass key in my pocket, warm from my palm. As we approached the glass structure, I noticed how different it looked in the morning light, less mysterious, more inviting. The condensation on the windows had cleared enough to reveal hints of green within, and I could see Thomas's curiosity building with each step. "I should have brought you here sooner," I admitted, fishing the key from my pocket. "You brought me when you were ready," he replied simply, and I loved him more for understanding. The lock turned easily, as if it had been waiting. The door swung open, and we were greeted by a rush of warm, humid air that carried the scent of earth and growing things. Thomas stepped inside behind me, and I heard his sharp intake of breath. The greenhouse was fuller than I'd ever seen it. Tomatoes hung heavy on their vines, their red globes catching the filtered sunlight. Herbs cascaded from hanging baskets, filling the air with their fragrance. But it was the flower bed along the far wall that drew Thomas's attention, the memorial garden I'd been tending for my mother. "Rosa," he whispered, recognizing the variety immediately. They were her favorites, the ones she'd grown in our old garden before the illness took her. I'd been nurturing these cuttings for 2 years, afraid they wouldn't take, afraid I'd lose this last living connection to her. "They bloomed for the first time last week," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I wanted you to see them." Thomas moved toward the roses, his expression soft with understanding. "They're beautiful. She would have loved knowing you kept them going." I nodded, feeling something release in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying without realizing it. I think I was afraid that if I shared this place, it wouldn't be mine anymore, that it wouldn't be ours, my mother's and mine. "But it still is," Thomas said, turning back to me. "It always will be. I'm just grateful you're letting me be part of it now." He was right, of course. Love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It multiplies. The greenhouse could hold all of us, past, present, and whatever future we were brave enough to grow together.